Welcome everyone. This is the college exploration information session. And so just make sure if you have to answer any questions, use the Q&A to type your questions to the presenters at any times. Make sure your camera and your microphones are off. And if you guys would like to sign up for more sessions, please go to www.acro.org and the recording will be available after the session at www.acro.org. So I will turn over to your presenters now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here on this Monday morning. Hope your week is off to a good start. It looks like some people are still kind of hopping in. So maybe we'll just give like a couple seconds. Looks like we might be slowing down a little bit now. But I'm Nadine Saint. I am an associate director at University of Richmond. We're excited to have the opportunity to share with you some advice about going through the application process during a difficult time as we're facing, a global pandemic. So what it means to apply to college during COVID-19. And so we're looking forward to sharing some advice with you along those lines. Before we jump into that, we're just going to take a moment to introduce ourselves, share a little bit about our institutions, and then we will bring it back to our panel discussion and going through some advice for you all during this time. And then we'll open it up to questions. If you have questions about the application process during this time, we're happy to chat about that a little bit further. So again, I'm Nadine. I work at the University of Richmond. We were all just sharing our sort of time in the field. This is kind of 10 years in the profession for me, and about my 8th year just in an admission office. I am an alumna of University of Richmond, so go Spiders, very biased of me. But we are, if you don't know much about Richmond, we're situated just outside the city of Richmond in Virginia. We're about 2 hours south of Washington, D.C. Downtown Richmond is about a 10-minute drive away from us. So we're suburban campus, urban flair. And we have a population of about 3,000 undergraduate students. So we're on the smaller side of the scale, but I like to say that our population and our mascot are really the smallest things about us. Otherwise, you're getting the resources of a very large research institution. But with a really tight-knit community. We're structured by 3 schools: arts and sciences, leadership, and business, but not something that you have to worry about when you're applying to Richmond. You're not applying into a specific school or major. We just give students some time to figure that out in their first couple years at Richmond. So I'm not going to take up too much more time because I want to get us certainly into our meat of the discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Farish to talk a little bit about herself and Emory.
Thanks so much, Nadine. I appreciate it. And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to be here with you. So just to introduce myself again, my name is Farish German. I'm an Associate Dean of Admission at Emory University, and my territories include Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, and West Virginia. So hello to all of you. I know that some of you may be in my territory, some of you may not, but I'm happy to be a resource for you about Emory because I am also an Emory alum and very proud of that. Graduated in 2011 and have been with the admission office ever since. And I'm excited to be here today to help you get to know Emory a little bit better. So I'd like to start our conversation about Emory at kind of a macro level and then work our way into some specifics. Emory University is a Research 1 institution in its largest sense, which is the highest caliber designation you can have as a research university. And in a testament to its belief in access to research, Emory actually allocates separate funding for undergraduates to design and direct their own research across the academic spectrum. So this would include disciplines like English and art history and philosophy to neuroscience, sociology, economics, and everything in between. We also believe that this engagement in research is really well supported by a liberal arts education. And there's probably no greater testament to that belief, I should say, than the fact that we have not one, but two liberal arts colleges, Emory College and Oxford College. And while colleges have wonderful things in common, there are probably some similarities you'll hear today about our institutions. The Emory College and Oxford College aspect of Emory University is pretty unusual. I dare say unique, because instead of having two colleges that specialize in different academic disciplines, both of our colleges are liberal arts colleges. They offer the same majors, same minors, pre-professional tracks like pre-med, pre-vet, pre-law, specialized undergraduate degree programs in business and nursing, but they have different environments based on what campus they're located on. So this really gives high school students like yourselves the chance to customize an Emory undergraduate experience based on where you think you will learn and grow best and which of those colleges is the best fit for you. So you have two different kinds of liberal arts experiences with access to all the resources and opportunity that come with being at a major research university. So given that the academics are the same, the distinctions between Emory and Oxford are really environmental, based on location, size, and the amount of time that you spend there. So I want to break that down briefly just a little bit more. Emory College is our medium-sized liberal arts college of about 5,000 undergraduates located on our university campus, which is in Metro Atlanta. So if any of you have visited Atlanta before, I imagine you are familiar with, or even if you haven't visited Atlanta, you've seen photos of downtown, where we have the famous Center for Civil and Human Rights, the Coca-Cola Museum, the Georgia Aquarium, Centennial Olympic Park. So that is about a 10-minute drive from Emory University. Emory College on that university campus also accommodates a 4-year college experience. So students can spend from their first year through their senior year there. Whereas our Oxford College is our small liberal arts college of about 1,000 undergrads located in the Atlanta suburbs. So about a 45-minute drive from that downtown area I was just describing. And part of why it is so small is because it is a 2-year college and campus. Those 1,000 undergrads are all first years and second years. And then at the end of their second year, they are all automatically transitioning to Emory College at Emory University for their junior and senior year. Now, that being said, any student that starts out at Oxford is an Emory undergraduate from day one that wanted that Oxford experience, either for the suburban setting, the smaller community, and in many cases, earlier leadership opportunities. You know, the sophomores or the seniors there. So they're the ones running student government, college council, athletics groups, arts groups, et cetera. And then everyone is spending junior and senior year at Emory College on the Atlanta campus. Everyone is graduating from that campus. Everyone's diploma says Emory University, no matter where they start, right? So again, something that's a little bit unusual about us. And just to contextualize this in the admission process, because we kind of joke that this is the most confusing thing you'll have to learn about Emory. So once you've got this down, it is just smooth sailing from there. So if you are considering Emory, and I hope you are, for an undergraduate experience, you would actually send one application to Emory University, and we would default consider you, the admission office, for both colleges, Emory College and Oxford College, unless you stipulate on the application that you only want to be considered for one or the other. And that is totally up to you. Whatever you decide changes nothing about our process. We review your application in exactly the same way. Your likelihood of admission remains the same. Like I said before, this is just kind of a unique opportunity to further customize that undergraduate experience, okay? Beyond that part of our process, all of our applications are holistically reviewed by committees of admission counselors that always include your territory representatives. So I mentioned my territory earlier. So always we have that contextual advocacy in the process, which is great. The holistic review, which I recognize a lot of colleges talk about, the way that kind of lines up specifically for Emory is that we're looking at some academic as well as some personal elements to give you a holistic admission decision, with none of them in a vacuum alone dictating your admission to Emory. So actually, when it comes to academic consideration, your rigor of curriculum and your GPA are going to be the most compelling elements to us. And we are test optional for this coming admission cycle for both Emory College, Oxford College, as well as merit scholarships. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit more about test optional when we get to that portion of our kind of COVID narrative and reflection today. So more info to come on that, but just wanted to make that clear about Emory in this upcoming cycle. So from that standpoint, for the personal side of holistic review, we're looking at, your writing pieces, your letters of recommendation. We require 2 from teachers, as well as looking at things like your non-academic engagement. What are you doing when you're not in class and not sleeping? What is happening in the rest of your life in between? That's very meaningful to us. And all of those things are showing us ideally intellectual curiosity and personal character that are playing a role in our admission decision process, okay? I think affordability is also important to talk about when we talk about Emory. So for merit scholarships, that's holistically evaluated as well. And like I mentioned before, test optional this year as well. All you need to do to be considered for merit scholarships at Emory is have your application in by November 15th to Emory University. And it's just your application for admission, nothing extra. And it doesn't mean you have to be an early decision candidate, right? You can check off regular decision. There's no bearing on your candidacy for a scholarship. It's just allowing you to get started a little bit sooner in the process and let us get back to you in February about your scholarship status along with your admission information. So please have that deadline in the back of your mind if you're a senior and you're interested in merit scholarships that range from partial tuition awards, full tuition room and board awards, full tuition room and board and research stipend. For financial aid, Emory guarantees meeting 100% of demonstrated need. About 56% of our students are on or receiving financial aid, I should say. So definitely very dedicated to creating access to an Emory education, no matter where a family may be on that financial spectrum. So it was a lot of information about Emory really quickly, but I just wanted to give you some highlights about who we are and what that application process might look like for you. And I will pass it along to my amazing colleague, Katie at Auburn.
Thank you, Farish. And hello, everyone. My name is Katie Morgan. I am one of the admissions advisors here at Auburn. I actually recruit students from Tennessee, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. So unfortunately, I'm not officially your admissions advisor. I'm really grateful to be here and just know that the Carolinas have a really special place in my heart. I've got family on both sides, mom and dad, that are from places like Greenville, Travelers Rest, Spartanburg, Kingstree, Mount Pleasant, Charlotte. So I spent many a good childhood memory in all of those places. So while I'm not there with you physically right now, and while I'm not technically your admissions advisor, just know that I'm really excited to be here. And if you want to know who your admissions advisor is, her name is Lindsay Borden. And you can find her information online. If you go to auburn.edu/admissions/recruitment, that gets you to our landing page for all of our admissions advisors, and you just need to search by state. So South Carolina, North Carolina, and Lindsay's info will pop up there. But a little bit more about me. I, like Lindsay, I'm also an alum of Auburn University. I'm actually a two-time graduate, back in school for a third round, and I'm going on about 5 years in the admissions office in a professional setting. So time has flown by, definitely an interesting, no year is the same, and this one is particularly unique, but that's partly why we're giving this presentation, to kind of ground you in helping all of you through the admissions process in light of COVID-19. But before we dig into that, and I'll kick off the conversation talking about test optional stuff, I want to talk a little bit more about Auburn. So we are a land grant R1 public university in Auburn, Alabama, which is East Central Alabama. Frame of reference, geographically speaking, we're about an hour and a half south west of the Atlanta airport, probably 2 hours south of Atlanta metro area. In the opposite direction, about 2 hours south of Birmingham. So those are two larger cities that are close by. And then we're about 3.5 hours from the coast, like the Alabama and Florida coastline and all those beautiful beaches. And then the opposite direction, about the same amount of time, 3.5 hours north, we've got the mountains. So we're really, for a lot of folks, a really great place geographically centered. Auburn itself is about 70,000 residents, so fairly small, definitely suburban. I wouldn't say rural, I certainly wouldn't say urban either, compared to the other two places that you'll learn more about in terms of Emory and Richmond, but suburban feel. Auburn itself is about 30,000 students total, about 25,000 undergraduate students, and we usually bring in about 4,800 incoming freshmen each year. So we're certainly a big school by most people's standards, but I think Auburn's often able, the university and the community, able to find a balance between big and small for a lot of students. So for example, we've got over 150 different majors, close to 600 student organizations, but your classes will probably be surprisingly small if you think like, that's a lot of people, like 30,000 people is a ton of folks, and that makes me nervous. Most of your classes will be 40 or fewer. Our student to faculty ratio is 20:1. So we really want to give you as small of an experience in the classroom, so where it truly matters. And that's important to us, while also giving you all of the benefits that come with a big school and all of these majors as well. Speaking of majors, I think the entry point for a lot of folks, understandably and rightly so, are majors within the College of Business and College of Engineering. So those are two separate colleges. They're both top ranked in the state of Alabama. And so that's often, oh, you're a business school. Oh, you're an engineering school. And that's true, but not exclusively. So again, the entry point is often those majors or SEC sports like football or even basketball. I hope your entry point for football was not this past Saturday, because that was a painful game to watch, but there's always next week, and that's the beautiful thing. But the point is, sometimes the entry point are things like that. But I think there's a lot of unexpected things that Auburn can bring you in terms of an experience educationally and extracurricularly. So for example, we're kind of a beautiful little hotspot for performing arts and creative experiences. So for example, our fashion merchandising program, we've got two fashion programs. One's merchandising, which is giving you that textile work, the hands-on work, as well as the business side of the fashion industry. That's usually in the top 5 nationally and number 1 in the South. Then you've got just the apparel merchandising. So that's certainly more focused on the textile design work. That's also usually a top 10 program nationally and top 5 in the South. So a lot of people are really surprised to hear that things like our fashion merchandising program and interior design and architecture are some of the best in the country here at Auburn. You've also got a couple of new buildings, which we're super excited about. One is already here, and it's our Googe Performing Arts Center, named after our current university president. And so that is definitely an exciting addition to our campus and our community. We'll have lots of orchestra performances and dance and Broadway and all sorts of performances. I think they had over 50 shows last season. This season, again, a little different because of the times, but it is still a cultural a landing place for so many in the Auburn University family, as well as the local community. Another building that's being built as we speak is our Tony and Libba Rain Culinary Science Center. So we're actually one of the only programs in the country, culinary science program, at a 4-year college and university. So that's super exciting. And it's a brand new building that will be great for all of our hospitality students. It'll be a boutique hotel, of course, the culinary program, and lots of other things. So that's a super exciting addition. We've also, like I said earlier, have surprisingly small classes. So you kind of expect the unexpected with Auburn. I also want to refer back to something I mentioned earlier, kind of almost in passing, in that we are a land grant institution. If you're not familiar with that, that essentially means that we were founded with the premise of serving the citizens of the state of Alabama and then the nation as a whole. And back in the 1800s, the mid 1800s, when we became a land grant institution, that often meant majors in agriculture and mechanics engineering. So we have that strong foundation, but everything that we do at Auburn, both inside and outside of the classroom is mission driven towards that idea of having scholarly and practical research and hands-on experiences that will make people's lives better. So again, we're still really strong in engineering and our agriculture, but the land grant of today can include things like our architecture program. We have a rural studio through that college that is grounded in bringing good and efficient design to underserved areas of the state, like West Alabama. It's 5 counties specifically. Rural Studio has been around for 30 years, and they have built over 200 structures. One big project right now is 20K homes, meaning building homes for $20,000 or less, and you learn more every time you do it. So if you're interested in that design and building, but also philanthropic, like giving back and making people's lives better, this is an incredible program. We've also are really strong with cybersecurity research and making sure everybody is safe online and protected, both individually and as a nation. So that's a driving point of research for us. But as an R1 institution like Emory, like Farish mentioned, we are in an elite group of institutions that are outputting the most research that an institution can. So all that to say, we've got a lot going on campus, both academically and socially. We are also test flexible. That's the word that we're using this year. It's iteration of test optional. We've got lots of opportunities for you to all apply. Applying for admissions and for scholarships is a holistic review process. So if you have questions about the application process, you're welcome to drop them in the Q&A for any of us. But I want to transition, maybe bring us all back and transition into, not turning my video off, transition into the COVID-19 admissions in the world of conversation. So I will take the lead, but certainly welcome feedback from Farish and Nadine when it comes to test optional. And so if you are not familiar, I would encourage you to check out, just Google NACAC, that's NACAC, that's an acronym, but NACAC test optional. Literally the first thing if you go onto Google is the link that will list about 1,400 institutions that have essentially come together and agreed that a student who does not have a test score will not be penalized in the admissions process. So that's a lot. It's a big addition even from last year to this year. 1,400 is a big change from the few hundred, I think, that were test optional previously. So all that to say is that a lot of folks, much like Auburn, we are test flexible for the first time this year. It's in large response to this pandemic and knowing that we've already had a difficult year. All of you are already in the midst of navigating the admissions process in unprecedented times. And the safest and most healthy thing is for you to not be in a situation where you need to be testing. And we know that cancellations have happened left and right for the last, I mean, what month are we in? 10? So probably 10 months of October, you know, going into October in 2020. All that to say, test optional means that, much like Farish said, things don't happen in a vacuum. Admissions decisions don't happen in a vacuum, which I appreciate. So at no point did we ever just make a decision on a test score, but now that we are truly holistic and removing that potential barrier, that's something for you all to consider. Now, referring back to that list, got some points. There's still nuances from school to school, and it's not, this is exactly how it will work at every school just because every person, every institution is on this list, they're doing it the same way. That's not the case. There are nuances. So there could be a situation where some schools at the point of application don't need a test score, but maybe they need one before you can submit your deposit. I think those are few and far between, but it's out there. There are other schools that maybe are test optional where you don't need a test score for admissions, but that list doesn't involve scholarship information. So there could be situations where schools require a test score for merit aid and merit scholarships while they're still test optional for admission. So my point there is that it is really important for all of you to have really thoughtful conversations with your admissions reps at all of the schools that you're looking at. And I don't think it's ever a situation where you should feel bad about asking, because even under normal circumstances, things bleed together from school to school, dates and deadlines, requirements. And I think that's in large part why we have jobs, to help you through the process and make it as straightforward and stress-free as possible. And then you add on that layer of test optional and everything else. It's okay for you to have questions. I don't ever want you all to feel embarrassed about needing clarification. Other things, when it comes to COVID or no COVID, I think it's really important for you all to consider the source of where your information is coming from and what we can and can't control. So for example, I've had students that are like, there's some conflicting information online, which could be true if you're not only looking at our admissions page, auburn.edu/admissions. That's what we can control. We cannot control any other third-party website, not knocking them. There could be really good information on that. But there could be something out there that's on whatever third-party website that says that we still require a test score because they're looking at last year's information. And we can't control that website, but we can control ours. We also can't control chat rooms and Facebook groups and any other source of conversations that happen. So if you're like, hey, I heard da-da-da-da, just consider the source. And if you have questions, come to us. But the website can be a really good starting point. I think Nadine will talk more about how websites and virtual information can navigate you into figuring out your fit in the world of COVID. And websites can be really powerful, but just know that only websites we can control are our institutional websites. I feel like I had some other things to talk about. Yes, juniors. If there's any juniors or younger in the audience, next year may be different. We may be just speaking of Auburn specifically, I know that we're test flexible for class of 2021. I don't know about juniors and younger yet. I hope so, but things just may change across the board from school to school. But that's not me saying, juniors, you should worry about testing because we may require a test next year. Please know, there are so many other things for you to focus your energies on, and it would not, regardless of what happens next year, we have plenty of time to navigate that. And I do not want you trying to sit for a test when we're in the middle of a pandemic and there's other things to stress about. So just stay safe, stay healthy. I'm talking to seniors and juniors right now, but just keep that in mind. So kind of a big rundown of test optional, but did I forget anything? Any other thoughts that you may have, Farish and Nadine, about that?
No, I think that covered it. You know, I absolutely second everything that Katie articulated. Please, safety is paramount right now. And none of us want you to be worrying whether you're a senior or a junior about what's coming next. You know, we just want you to keep yourself safe and, you know, engage in your education as much as you can. This is just such an unusual time. Be with your families, you know, put yourselves first. We're trying to be as student-centric as possible because we believe that's what's best for you. And so we want you to be able to lean into that and trust that test optional means what it says it does, and that we mean what we're saying. And I'm just going to add a little bit of real talk to Katie's diplomatic reference to third-party websites. I'm just going to say flat out, College Confidential should not be your top source of information about any college or university. I know that it feels very transparent and very candid, but that doesn't mean it's factual. That doesn't mean it's always correct. If you want to look at it, that's totally fine. But please always refer to our websites for actual information, as Katie said. So I just wanted to just dig a little deeper on that one.
And I will say, like, if you Google like Auburn admissions or whatever admissions, our admissions page may not be the thing that pops up first. It may be a third party. It may be College Confidential. It may be something. So just dig a little bit, because we can't control Google either. We could maybe buy some ads and hope to get to the top of the page, but we might not. Somebody did ask a really good question, Q&A, about is there a substantive difference between test optional and test flexible? Test optional usually just means you can submit it if you want, but it's not preferred, it's not required. Test flexible often means that there's another like testing component that you could add, whether it's ACT or SAT or AP or IB scores. So I kind of lump them together. I'm sure there are differences that maybe Farish and Nadine can parse out, but at least from my explanation when I'm talking to students about Auburn right now, they are very similar. And the idea, I think the biggest takeaway is that we do not prefer test scores. We're not trying to be secretive. To Farish's point, we mean what we say, and that we're not preferring test scores. You do not need to submit them for admissions, or at least for scholarship purposes at Auburn as well. So you're welcome to also Google like test optional versus test flexible, and a third-party website will give you some feedback, but at least that's kind of my thought process there.
There was another question about test prep online for students. The first one that comes to mind for me is Khan Academy. They have pretty good free testing resources for students to take advantage of, and that's always been online. So it's certainly, that might be a good place to start, but I don't know if you all have any other suggestions of free test prep online.
I think that's a great option.
Exactly. I agree. And to Katie's point, I think in the admission world, we use a lot of similar terminology because there are some standard practices out there, like holistic review, like being test optional, like being test flexible, that have a basic definition that is true in every iteration, but then how that is applied at any given institution can look different. You know, like we may all use holistic review in a slightly different way, because while we're all guaranteeing that not one single aspect of your application in a vacuum is dictating your admission, we may be looking at different components of your application. We may be putting different weight on different components of your application between our institutions. And I say that for test optional and test flexible as well, that while the basic definition may ring true, the application at any given institution for building that first year class may have some nuances and some differences. So I think digging a little deeper in every situation beyond just the basic definition, beyond that kind of top level vocabulary, is an important part of your college search process. And it does require time. It requires a little digging or asking questions of us, which is totally fine. Like Katie said, and Nadine has said, we're meant to be resources for you. This is why our websites are as robust as they are. It's also why it's easy to find our contact info on them, because we want to help you navigate what we know is a stressful and right now even more kind of ambiguous process than usual. So to that point, I'd love for us to kind of dive into our next area of tips and ideas for navigating admission in the COVID world, which is going to be your college writing pieces. You know, how are you approaching all these different sections in your application where you are being asked to reflect on a part of your life or a part of your experience, and help us get to know you a little bit better, especially in the cases that's more common now where we've never met you before. So As you may have seen, many application platforms have created a new section for reporting COVID impacts. So let's take, for example, the Common application, which has a separate COVID-19 section that's about 250 words total, where students can detail the impact they may have experienced due to COVID. So what this is giving you is the flexibility to not have to devote your 650 word personal statement to providing factual information about COVID impacts. You can still allow that essay to honor your lived experience and a narrative beyond this isolated period in time. Now, I'm not saying that you can't write about COVID in your personal statement. I'm just saying that you don't have to. And there may be better topics out there that help our admission offices get to know who you are as a person and a little bit of how you see the world and how you think, okay? So this new COVID-19 section is also separate from these traditional additional information sections that you've seen on Common App, Coalition, QuestBridge, et cetera, which still have a pretty significant word limit and are where you can report any academic or personal contextual information you think we need to have that is not stated elsewhere on your application. So that's also kind of these nuances to keep in mind of where is the most relevant place to put specific information for us to be able to, as efficiently and organically as possible, kind of work through your application and get to know you. I do want to note that the impact of COVID has been felt in really subjective and relative ways across the globe. And as such, the Common application, which we've been using for an example here, has provided different examples of the type of impact you should include in the new COVID-19 section, which include but are not limited to illness from COVID-19, loss from COVID-19, housing and employment disruptions, shifting in family obligations, significant disruption to your access to education. So as you think about whether or not to use this optional section, you do not have to fill out the COVID-19 section, okay? So as you think about if you want to use that section, I encourage you to reflect on whether the impact you are experiencing has been experienced by the majority of the world or not. So what I mean by that is, quite candidly, it's not the place to write about your general dislike of online learning. You know, we're all united in our frustration with a captive virtual landscape. This is really tough on all of us. So a lot of people in the world are going through that. It's also, candidly, ideally not the place to be writing about extracurricular interruptions and canceled summer plans. We're all going through that. Now, there are some types of canceled plans or events that are still helpful to convey in your application, and we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. So hold tight. Don't worry, we'll get to it. But for this COVID-19 section, this is where I urge you to think as far as you can beyond yourself and your lived experience, and know that we will be reading applications across the spectrum of COVID impact. So as you get ready to think about using this section or not, remember that the whole world is experiencing this together, and you don't have to let COVID become your sole identity across your entire application. But if you have experienced a significant impact, such as the ones we've described or the examples given to you on these major application platforms due to COVID, we would want to know that. We would want to be sensitive to that and honor that in the application process, and be cognizant of that as we get to know you in the application process. And that is what that section is for. So if you need to use it, it is there, and please be comfortable to use it because we would want you to in the admission process. But kind of stepping back from those really big, impactful elements of the COVID-19 experience, I'll get back to that broader world experience, which is just the cancellation and the abrupt stop of things that we were excited about and things that we were passionate about, and knowing that that is difficult to articulate on your application. So if you have extracurricular interruptions, I think the kind that we would want to know about in the college admission process are things that we maybe cannot assume. You know, we can assume that if you didn't get to engage in your spring tennis season, it's because of COVID, right? We can assume if there are things you've been doing all throughout high school that abruptly stopped for this period of the pandemic, it's probably because of the pandemic. If not, then let us know in additional information. But if you were selected for something, if you were receiving an honor of some kind and it was canceled due to COVID, it's still okay to tell us about that. It's still okay in that section of the application that's traditionally for extracurriculars or honors and awards to say, hey, I was actually selected out of a couple hundred applicants to participate in this 60-person internship, or, you know, this particular program or this particular activity. It was canceled due to COVID, but I was selected for it. That's still meaningful. We would still want to know that. So that's the kind of things we're looking for. If you're trying to help us understand what you missed out on, that's what we want to know, rather than this laundry list of how life changed necessarily, because we are all living that life. And I mentioned kind of talking about this in the extracurricular section because that is the common verbiage for that page of the application where you laundry list everything you're doing. But I wish we called it the non-academic engagement section. I wish that was our common verbiage because I think it encourages students to think more broadly about what we're looking for in that section, which is everything you're doing when you're not sleeping or sitting in a classroom, okay? That's what we want in that extracurricular section. It doesn't have to be just solely your school-based extracurriculars. We are just as interested in seeing the impact and the passion that you were showing outside of school altogether in a local organization or in a job or in family responsibilities, perhaps caring for an elderly dependent in the household or a younger sibling. Those things all tell us about great character and great community engagement and selfless contribution that mean a lot to us in our communities and that mean a lot to us in the admission process. So think broadly about that section, ever more so in the context of COVID, because your extracurriculars may have changed a lot during COVID. Maybe you're getting groceries regularly for a neighbor who's immunocompromised. Put that on there. You know, maybe you are now helping tutor younger siblings while also doing school virtually yourself. You know, your life and your engagement outside of your own education and sleeping, you know, may look really different. And that is still worth conveying in a resilient way, right? Not in a, well, this happened to me and it was really unfair, because again, we're all dealing with that, but in a resilient way. I think that can be very compelling in this process and a way to really make the best out of a difficult situation. So with that, I'll pass this along to my colleague Nadine to kind of round out our advice in terms of discerning fit in this virtual world.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll also add as well, something that I kind of realized recently is that your school counselors will also have a similar section on their school report form to talk about the impact of COVID. So if there's been any major shifts with your curriculum or impact to pass fail and things like that, any school counselors will have the opportunity to provide that context as well. So there are a lot of people, you know, in your court, you know, telling your story and trying to support the context of this situation. And there are a lot of resources available to you in order to navigate this whole thing as we're trying to figure it out. You know, really from all stakeholders in this process, from colleges and universities to school counselors to you all, we're definitely trying to figure out what is the best way and to assist you all through this process. But it can be difficult when you're trying to think about places to apply or places that you eventually want to enroll, how to find that fit when you can't come to campus for an official visit. In some ways, pushing us towards these virtual platforms, I think, has made information about our institutions available in a way that it has never been before. So we are making sure that we're giving out pertinent information to you all and putting a lot of effort into these virtual programs. But there are a lot of resources out there, so please use them. You know, Katie referenced NACAC as a great place to start if you're looking through institutions' test optional policies. But there's a lot of useful information on their website in general in terms of just navigating this process. Use your school counselors, college board, different websites that, you know, certainly assist with this process, but really consider your source. As Katie said, you should really be getting most of your information direct from the institution, because that is the information that we can control and the information that is correct. Because if you're getting it from outside, just know that it's filtered from a third-party perspective that is not always going to be reflective of the process from that high-level piece. It's always just going to be that individual experience. So what does fit mean? I think we can start there. It can be an academic fit, environmental, financial. There are a lot of pieces that fall into deciding if you're going to be successful and happy at an institution. And that's really what we mean by fit. And that could be a lot of different places. Fit doesn't mean that, I am interested in English and they have an English major, so that's my fit. You really want to be thinking beyond the question of, are my academic interests reflected, because your academic interest more than likely is going to change. So you might want to make sure you're in a place where you have that flexibility to change your mind if you're not 100% committed to engineering. And you want that sort of safety net, I think, in thinking about all other aspects of your experience that is going to shape your success, that's not directly tied to the classes that you're taking 3 or 4 times a week. So in order to do that, again, utilize those virtual presentations panels. Check number 1, you're participating in this. So that's a great start. But really dive deep into the admission websites that colleges and universities have, because we're all showing our virtual sessions and making sure that we're able to provide that information for you, from the very general to the more specific. And we are also a resource for you as admission officers and territory managers. Our job is to really understand the context and environment where you're coming from, and so we can better assist you through this process. We are generalists. We know a lot about, or a little about a lot of different things with our institutions. So we serve as kind of the directional signs to various resources. If we can't get really deep into the nuance of a question, we know where to send you in order to get that information. And when we can't come to your high schools and we can't come to a college fair, being in touch with us directly about your questions is certainly something that we want to see. But be topical in your questions, make sure they're relevant to the session at hand and what you are learning about that day. So if it's a topic that's directly about academics, don't be asking questions about student life, because there's probably another platform where that's more appropriate. We have limited time when we're doing these virtual sessions, so we just want to make the most of it. But utilize those virtual options, because there's a lot out there. Still, though, not being able to stand in the center of campus and look around and say, this feels right, is tough. So, maybe read the student newspaper, get a finger on the pulse of what's going on our campuses. That's, maybe an unfiltered perspective as well. And you can maybe take some of it with a grain of salt, but it is a good resource to understand a little bit more. Our admission offices are also offering advice just on the general application process during this time, as we are when we're talking about COVID specific issues. But I know our office has an admission blog, and Dartmouth has a podcast. There's other resources out there to try to glean some more information. And really just be conscious of our current policies when you might be thinking about doing a visit to campus, whether that might be driving to our campuses, if you're in driving distance with somewhere, but you need to make sure that the university is in a position to host visitors. So please, before you get in the car and drive several hours, please take a look at our websites to understand what our current policy is about visitors. We are very much, those of us in session, trying to keep the integrity of an in-person residential experience intact. And so please just make sure that you're respecting the policies regarding visitors. And we don't want to have to turn you away when you've drove a few hours, to get there and not to have a good experience interacting with our communities. And if you are participating in virtual events, there might be a fee waiver or something like that. So that's always a bonus if you're really engaged in some of these virtual admission and aid sessions that typically would serve as a campus visit. There might be a little bonus there. So we're coming up at 1 minute, I think. Really close. So I don't know if there were any additional questions in the chat while I was speaking, but I'm happy to address any last minute Thanks. Oh, and then lastly, I'll plug, we have a virtual event happening this Thursday, the 8th at 7 p.m. You can join Katie Farish and then our friend Eric from Dartmouth as well. We aren't able to share the registration link in a chat feature, but you can email me at nadine.saint@richmond.edu, and I'm happy to send that along to you to register if you want to know a little bit more about our institutions specifically.
All right, so thank you guys so much. Let me share my screen. Thank you to all the participants. If you guys would like to do a quick survey, it will appear as soon as the window closes. You can sign up for more sessions at www.cacro.org, and this recording will be available at www.cacro.org. Once again, thank you guys so much for your presentation. Hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye.